Hello there. My name is Peter, and welcome to Financial Decapitation Podcast. And here are my co-hosts, Michael and Sarkis.
Hello.
And
Hello.
I want to introduce you guys back to the podcast because a lot has happened in the last period of time since we had our last episode, and there's a lot of crazy things in government and business, and the world is a crazy place.
Yep.
And we wanted to start off talking about the Fed rate tax cuts, and Michael seems to have a lot he wants to say on this topic. Why don't we get started with that?
All right. So, it's been an interesting time. I'm for anyone there. Yeah, what's up?
Let me stop you one sec. I almost forgot our wine and cheese for the day.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, our wine is water, Dasani kind, the Dasani special, and our cheese is actually Thai food.
That's right.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So now that we got that out of the way, why don't we get started on the Fed?
I feel like our initial objective of having that wine and cheese thing, it was cool for the first couple episodes, but I think it slowly evolved.
Yeah, I'm enjoying this cheese Thai combination here.
This water is actually quite refreshing and doesn't leave any hangover. So
Although
That's
I wouldn't
true.
mind wine
yeah,
from
it's
time
wine.
to time. So
That's true. Next one, we'll bring some wine.
Yes.
We'll be very classy.
yeah, it's just sometimes having 3 bottles of wine is that knocks you out. For
That's
the whole
true.
Day.
That's true. But yeah, so I mean, going back, so the Feds in the last week, last week. Today is the 28th of September. So it was last week. The Feds did a $140 billion cash infusion into the American money supply. So the intent of this was we are currently seeing in the 30-year yield an inverted yield curve, which is not good, which is very, very not good. And what we mean by that is when we're looking at a yield curve, we're looking at the payout of the interest rates, right? So we're seeing that the Fed's duty is to ensure that the interest rates are fluid and are healthy for the economy to grow. And this is why they do monetary policy, in which they will, they'll start putting money into the money supply, and they'll start cycling currencies so that they can drive down interest rates or increase interest rates according to whatever they want in the economy. As you all are very well aware, America has seen a 10-year bull, which has been phenomenal, but also quite worrisome because the economy should cycle naturally. But when we see ourselves plunging into just a huge amount of success repeatedly, we start going into really off-chance scenarios where you start seeing a lot of IPOs pop up that are overvalued, which you remember us talking about in the prior episodes. The season of the IPOs was around, and people were just opening up all these businesses, and they were cashing out big time.
I called 2019 the year of the IPO.
Yeah, right.
You're not wrong.
Absolutely. And there was actually the first company we did see. I know this kind of segues away from the Fed rates, but Peloton. I don't know if you guys know, they do the bikes.
Yeah, so I
exercise
don't know
bikes.
a huge amount about them, but I looked into it just after you mentioned them, and I saw they make like exercise equipment, bikes mostly.
They're like high-end bikes, though. These aren't like your middle-class mom who wants to have a nice bike in the room where she can work out, or for dad or whatever. No, this is for very wealthy people. This is a $2,500 exercise bike.
Professional athletes and high-level athletes.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Would want those. And what's very lucrative about this company is that they have these like training exercise videos and live bike videos. So you can sit there and you'll be biking, and on the screen you'll have an instructor who's like, yeah, here we go, we're doing this now, we're doing this. So it's like having an at-home instructor on the bike, but it's a monthly subscription. So you have to pay a subscription to maintain that service.
I didn't know.
Yes. So Peloton came out with their IPO, and this is the season of the IPO. Naturally, we would think, oh man, they're going to go in with 29 asking, which is what they opened with, and they're probably going to skyrocket and then probably level out like Beyond Meat and several other IPOs. We actually saw them lose 11% since then, so they've actually decreased in value, which is kind of shocking. But at the same time, I'm not really surprised, because if you look at a lot of their financial backings, they're not a big company.
No, it doesn't seem like it.
No, they're heavily levered. Yeah, it's
Well, so this company got what looks like $1 billion valuation, what can possibly be worth $1 billion?
Exactly. That's the big thing is they don't manufacture these. They don't own the plants for manufacturing these bikes. So that's the first off.
Their product isn't necessarily rare and hard to come by. It's not It doesn't seem like anything special. At the end of the day, it's just an exercise bike.
Right.
You can still buy good bikes for cheaper than what they sell it for.
It also seems like competitors can easily jump into space and compete with them with similar services.
It also seems like there's a lot of other companies out there that do the exact same thing and possibly on a better scale because, unlike that company, I've seen a lot of other companies who would, for instance, sell equipment to gyms that buy them in large volume, whereas they sell one to some random bored-at-home mom or something. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, it seems like I don't see where $1 billion valuation is coming from just on the fundamental side. This company isn't doing anything worth $1 billion, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, when it comes to exercise equipment, with families who do buy them, we do see that, you'll use it for a year or two, and then it does kind of start gathering dust. And I mean, I'll be honest, we have a treadmill in my family that's been with us for 10 whatever years. And I mean, most recently, my mom's been using it, but before then, dude, that thing has not been touched.
Yeah.
And it's a highly durable good, so it's, once I buy it, that's it. Like,
what makes their product so high end?
So the idea is Peloton likes to brag that their product is very, is superior in the way it's made. Like, so they're saying the materials that they put towards making it are very nice, right? The style and the model and the look of it is very sleek. So naturally, when you do look at a Peloton bike, you think, wow, that's a really nice looking bike. Like, boy, that definitely is worth $2,500. But I've seen people like in the Yahoo Finance like comment section where, a lot of people are just joking or talking or whatever. People were saying like, oh, wow, that's the most expensive clothes hanger I've ever heard or ever seen in my life. And some people were joking that when they actually tried the bike, it felt like
whatever,
just a random bike. Yeah, like any other bike. So it's kind of weird that they would, price it that way.
Good. It's an exercise bike, so good materials and looks nice. It's not a fashion statement, first of all. It's not like your phone that you show everyone or the new piece of clothing that you got that you're wearing out. So that's kind of that's a stretch. I feel but that's just like on a list of like a large number of IPOs that have made it this year that aren't doing super well. So something we talked about earlier was Uber and Lyft, which are currently at all-time lows. And the way Lyft is leveraging their money, the way they're moving cash flow is not amazing at all. Uber might be a little bit different story because they're covering a lot of different grounds. Like, for instance, autonomous driving cars, and they're trying to invest into the AI segment, and they're trying to do a lot of things in developing some form of technology that would later bolster them. So they're dumping a lot of money in places that might not necessarily pay off right now. But Lyft is kind of going nowhere, and you're not seeing their money move in the right direction. And currently, that they're at an all-time low since their IPO came out earlier this year. Yeah, it's like 30-something bucks. I think it was like $33 last time I looked at it.
I haven't seen Lyft.
It's dismal. It's really dismal. There's a good number of these companies that are hitting the market this year that just like are flopping. I'm sorry. I was thinking of Uber. Lyft is at $41 currently at the time of recording, and Uber is at $30 at the time of recording. And last Friday, which was the 27th, they both down a considerable percentage. Uber dropped like 4%, Lyft dropped 1.5%. They're getting hit pretty hard by the market drops in the last couple of weeks and months. Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's what's been kind of concerning the feds in general is when you do have such a strong market like this where IPOs are entering the market at a rapid rate. I mean, Uber and Lyft are a pretty good example because they entered the market and a lot of people were saying that they were heavily overvalued because a lot of their, they don't own the cars the drivers are driving. They don't even own the drivers because it's contracted work. So the big question is, wow, how are we like really valuing this company? I mean, we're valuing the services, we're valuing the apps and the usage of those services, but other than that, if you look at debt equity ratios, those companies are incredibly levered, which brings a lot of worry because in the event that one of them just screws up, that's that.
I think there's a big question about the way they run their businesses if it's a sustainable model,
right?
Because
exactly.
you're greatly varying your operation on whether or not the drivers, first of all, think that they get paid enough, and to keep them happy, you have to pay them enough. But to keep your company and your investors happy, you have to pay them just enough to make a profit. And then when you start raising prices for the customers who are trying to get rides, it doesn't make sense because then your competition's doing better than you. So the margin of it's really slim. So it's kind of like a fine line, ratio of where do we go and how sustainable is it? Can we continue to pay them the exact same amount we're paying? Will people continue to be happy with this amount? Especially with companies like taxis who used to be set rates, who would pay taxes to the city to keep the city happy. The city would keep their industry open. They had, all these different licenses, and then people would always know that a taxi, it's not like some random thing. But, there was always the question with taxis about like, oh, they're going to overcharge me, or it costs too much money, or like, I don't know, who's this guy behind the wheel? Just some random guy. Can I trust him?
Right.
At least with like rating systems and stuff, you have a little better idea. You have a picture of who's picking you up. But I mean, that's unrelated because ultimately it all comes together of like price and fairness, and it's not a hugely sustainable model, and at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
Uber is going to try and fix that with autonomous driving, but who knows how that'll work out.
And again, bring this to full revolution and tying it to the feds, those types of business models mixed with those types of IPOs and the skepticism that's rallied behind that, especially in the hearts of the investors who are putting the money into these companies, it's concerning because I know the feds right now are probably thinking this is not good. This is a 10-year bull run. We're having companies entering the market that might be overvalued. We're oversaturating some businesses. We're building a storm pretty much.
Right.
And so that's why this whole idea behind the negative yield curve is so bad, because now investors look at like a 10-year note from the government and they know because it's negative, they know that they're going to get less money back at maturity than they are putting the money into the note now. And why is that a bad thing? Because that means the investor is much better off pocketing that money.
And just hiding.
And just not participating.
Yeah.
And that's not good, because we've seen in the past 50 years, before a recession or market correction or something of a high severity that leads to a market change, we've seen an inverted yield curve occur. Now, when the feds did this whole $140 billion cash infusion to try to drive interest rates down, to encourage more business stimulation, and so that they can control the market, help it simmer, right, rather than dropping, but to simmer the market a bit, it did the inverted effect.
Yeah.
We saw the inverted yield curve go even more inverted. Now it recovered a little bit, only marginally since then, but it's still inverted, which is the scariest part. Which is, wow, we are still running a higher cost than benefit with all of our treasury notes.
What's most interesting is how little of a correction occurred after the first inversion.
Yeah. There's no rebound.
Yeah.
And I mean, we were talking about in the last couple of podcasts, the recession is brewing. And it's not a matter of... Exactly. And it's not a matter of if or, it could. No, it's a matter of when at this point. We know it's going to happen. It's impossible for us to somehow get away with this 10-year bull without any repercussions. Not to mention the growing student loan crisis, which is going to hit pretty soon when students from, 10, 15 years ago start defaulting loans and shit. Yeah. That's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Major problem.
Yeah. And then these kind of companies that have blown up start to show cracks and signs of falling. Like, for example, it's been kind of all over. Not all, like it's been around like the news has come out that the Wework CEO stepped down.
Right.
And then some news has come more to the light of some of the practices that the CEO Adam Newman did. Including privately himself owning land that he then leased out to the company that he owned.
Oh.
So he basically owned the buildings where WeWork had its office spaces, and he would rent them out, lease them out for a markup to his own company, which had majority shares, and would sign his own checks.
Oh, that's a doozy.
And yeah, he's been under scrutiny. And on top of that, apparently, I've been reading through some of the things. Apparently, he pressured and made WeWork change its name to the We Company, and the reason he did that is for a $5 million license fee, because he had the right to the name We Company under a separate entity.
Oh, okay. So he was just trying to change names from a previous entity to bring it to this entity, or was he merging, or what was the intention?
It was to make $5 million.
So, because I see what you're saying. He owned the name
We Company.
Okay, and he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna buy this, but take my current company's money and put it in my pocket." Just
oh,
wow,
I see.
Yeah.
So the current company can get what they want. They would leverage something off of him that he just pockets.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
he pockets $5 million.
That sounds like a Ponzi scheme.
Oh,
like
yeah,
leveraged
and a lot
against
of
your
people
investors.
have been making those sorts of accusations.
Yeah, that literally sounds like a Ponzi scheme leveraged against your investors.
Yep.
You're just taking their money.
Yeah.
Wow. So I mean, he stepped down last
He stepped
round.
down. Yeah.
So I mean, are the investors going to come for him?
He's still chairman, from what I understand. Still involved.
He's still on the board.
So they're not suing him?
I don't know what's going on in terms of lawsuits. I still need to look more into it, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
But I've just kind of keeping a cursory glance at some of the news that's been coming out about the company.
Oh my God.
And it's not good, especially because they had an upcoming IPO.
Yeah, they were. He was trying to get into the market, and when they were first coming out, a lot of analysts were saying this thing might be a little overpriced. I'm not sure if this is going to be successful. So, a lot of people were really skeptical about WeWork. And I'll be honest, I was on the same train too, because I was reading the news about WeWork and kind of what their function is, what they were trying to bring to the table. And I was like, I just don't see the competitive edge for what they're trying to provide and the services that our economy is really diving for. We may be service-based, but, the whole shared workspace, it just, I don't know if that really jives with a lot of people.
I mean, I could see the utility of it in terms of potentially lower monthly costs if it's a small company or you don't need a dedicated office just all to yourself, or if you're a mobile worker. If whatever job you do, you need an office, but you're going to be moving from frequently.
Yeah.
Having access to multiple office spaces throughout the U.S. There's applications there. But yeah, I overvalued for what it was.
Yeah. And I mean, I think something that would synergize well with a company like that is if the U.S. did move its position from maybe corporatization and larger companies to more self-employed or contracted based. Because my only concern with what WeWork was bringing to the table was I don't know if we have a whole lot of like self-employed, or freelance population that is going to cycle through workspaces that often, or at least enough for WeWork to really pull a good profit. And I know that was the concern of many investors was application-wise, you said it perfectly. Like, it has a good application. The question is, whether or not that application is going to really apply, to the people out there.
The concept is interesting. It's not a terrible concept, but it seems like, something like that doesn't really come up all that often. Trying to merge, work through sheer chance.
Yeah, like I've never met someone who is like, man, I wish I could like just get an office for a day and then that's it.
Yeah.
I've only heard of people saying like, yeah, I'm starting my business. I'm going to lease an office for several years. Boom. So it's interesting.
Coming from my own personal background and previous experiences, my internship the company that I worked for, on top of working in the wholesale industry, they also owned. They leased out a big piece of big office space that was too big for just themselves. Mm-hmm. So they did actually have a shared office space, workspace with other companies,
right?
Just to kind of bring down the monthly cost of rent. And there wasn't really, it was less about collaboration and such, because it would be random companies like law firms and such, not things particularly pertaining to the fashion or clothing industries.
Right.
But it was a sort of, it was a symbiotic relationship of we both brought down the monthly costs of rent for each other.
Yeah.
So there is kind of a financial purpose of like shared office spaces. There's definitely an advantage.
I mean, it sounds like a roommate model.
Shared office spaces are a common occurrence. It's common practice. Oftentimes, you'll see like the giant Bank of America building downtown isn't entirely Bank of America. Mm-hmm. Most of the floors are some other companies that are renting so that they can share the cost. And Bank of America looks like they own the whole building. That's very common in office space. That's not a new thing. But I mean, I guess in terms of like making office space cheap, as long as it's at least cheap, it's not that bad.
I mean, at the end of the day, if you own an office building, it's an investment. So I mean, if you're going to house your own company in it, and then you're going to have some open spaces, you're going to want to lease those out.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. I just feel like Wework is kind of introducing something that I think the free market already just does out of natural practice. I think more or less I think you said it before though, Sarkis, is more or less they were going for the whole like, oh, it's a symbiotic relationship because it's like an open office was what they were kind of going for.
Free flowing, like all these entrepreneurs working or talking together and such. That was the sort of feel and ideas behind some of their philosophy. I
mean, and it sounds cool. I'm not going to lie, it sounds interesting because, I mean, it's kind of like business school where you had a bunch of people with a bunch of different ideas.
But I don't expect it to be the scale that it is.
Right.
I would expect it to have maybe 1 or 2 locations.
Right.
But I wouldn't expect it to be, $billion+ dollars.
I mean,
that's why I was concerned about the IPO.
How big are they? Like, what are they worth? What are their numbers?
Let me actually pull up the exact numbers.
They're not public, so it's very difficult to get those numbers.
Okay.
But there was numbers on some of their previous revenues from past years.
They did, yeah. They posted it up because analysts were saying, like, take a look at this. These numbers don't add up. It doesn't make sense that you'd be valued at this amount.
Oh, that's not good.
Why?
Hold on.
Yeah.
Wework loses $1.9 billion on $1.8 billion in revenue during 2018. That's not good.
So already off to a bad start, and we don't even know what their true value is. But the fact that they can't make money that's a problem.
I mean,
it apparently doubled its revenue from $800 million in 2017 to $1.8 million in 2018.
I'll say this. When it comes to valuating companies, and you hear someone say like, "Yeah, we doubled this number. Yeah, we quadrupled this number." It's like from The Office, when Pam was winning that award, and he's like, I doubled my sales, and then Andy's like, oh, from what, 2 to 4, and it switches to scene, and she's like, yep, like that's the problem. Yeah, I doubled my sales and my revenues and shit, but it's exactly that. Oh, from 2 to 4.
Yeah,
it's
kind of misleading.
So
everything's a matter of
this is from Crunchbase News.
Okay,
here are some of the numbers. 2017 they had $886 million in revenue, but their net loss was $933 million.
So they're running a deficit.
2018 it was $1.82 billion revenue, but their net loss was $1.9 billion.
Okay.
So
so they're running a deficit.
Yeah, that's a strong deficit too.
It's a very high deficit. That's net margin of negative 105% in 2017 and negative 104% in 2018.
Dude.
Wow.
Yeah.
How have they not gone under?
That's a good question.
Investors, from what I understand.
Like angel investors are still involved?
I guess if they're contracted in, then they're forced to, right?
Some can be. I mean, like in Shark Tank, for example, they buy a piece of equity in the company. Angel investors function the same way, where the company will be like, "Hey, you're a multi-billionaire. We'll give you 30% of the company if you can give us a couple $1 million, whatever, to get off the ground." I guess more or less, I'm kind of curious if they are in a contract situation where, they're like, I have 30% ownership. If the angel investors are like, so
I want to liquidate.
I would like to liquidate. How can Wework liquidate money that doesn't exist?
If they have no way to match that liquidation, then the investors get angry, and then you have a serious situation where you need to get in more investors to back your other investors, and then you're just driving a deficit, digging a hole that never-ending hole that isn't going to work.
Yeah, and I mean, just for people listening, angel investors are typically super, super, super rich individuals who will help venture capitalists by giving them just a huge lump sum of cash for, a moderate valued equity in return for it. And then, of course, will slowly trickle out of the business, or will trickle out of or will leave the business in a lump sum once you can get your own financials and your whole situation set with business loans. The big problem is that with angel investors as well as venture capitalists is, because it's not a bank loan, if I fuck up and I fail, you, the angel investor, lost your money. It's gone. There was I can't do anything about it. I lost it because I was like, I trust you. You're going to get up on your feet. I'm going to get my money back in return. But if you fail, I lose my money.
Yeah.
Right? That's it.
At the end of the day, they're buying a portion of a business, not a portion of money.
Right.
It's not like a hard loan of sorts where you have some sort of collateral, because oftentimes you don't even have collateral, which is where leverage comes from, and the proper way to invest your money as opposed to just dumping money into a dying business is something that desperately needs it.
Right. And you know what, actually, that kind of segues into a neat topic I'm currently researching. As I was telling you guys, I'm currently working in a research team at Cal State Northridge, and we're studying ESGs, which is environmental, social, and governance stocks. And when we're talking about that, it's that sustainability section in the Yahoo Finance portion where it talks about sustainability, right? And when we discuss sustainability, a lot of people naturally think they're talking about environment, but we also talk about social and governance. And what we're really studying here is investor behavior correlating to the ESGs. Because remember, we've talked about emotion being a big driving force when it comes to investors. So, looking at these stocks and whatnot, people are going to be like, Wework sounds like a cool idea. Just invest. Angel investors function the same way. So going into, ESGs, we're trying to see, are investors just going wow, that has a really high ESG score. I'm just going to go ahead and invest in them because they obviously must be doing super well in the market. Or are investors creating a baseline performance level and then ranking ESG numbers after they get the collection of stocks that meet their financial requirement? Yeah.
See, this is another thing that is actually kind of interesting, which is something like ESGs might tie into passive investment. So people who kind of, they put dollars and cents here and there into investments, but don't really look closely into it. Companies like Acorn do this sort of stuff, and even Robinhood, encourages kind of small passive investments and such. And they all have these sort of features where you can kind of go, you can invest into environmental friendly companies and all that.
Right.
So I wonder if that might play into it. Are those people more susceptible to losses?
So
it's possible.
I
mean, that's the point of the
maybe there's a bubble there, because I believe, forgetting his name, he was one of the shorters in The Big Short. Oh my gosh!
Actually, I haven't seen that movie. Big Short.
Yeah. Oh, it's good. Wait,
movie.
You didn't read the book though?
No.
In econ?
No.
They didn't make you read it?
No, they didn't.
They made me read it.
No, really?
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard good things about the book. I haven't read it. I haven't seen it.
So this topic actually is one of the things I really wanted to cover. So a while ago, I made a joke about the vegan index fund that included Apple in the index because just the name Apple and it's vegan.
Oh,
but it turns out there's actually a reason for that, and this correlates to what you're looking at in the ESG, which is Apple is one of the more socially responsible companies because they promote a lot of recycling and reuse of old electronics and devices because turns out, and it makes total sense, recycling an old device to use the aluminum or the metals on it and the gold pins and such is a lot cheaper than mining for more.
Right.
And so if you look into the amount of recycled materials that go into like an iPhone 11 Pro right now, I think I saw some figure where it was like over 85% of it is recycled material.
Mm-hmm.
And they're able to save a significant cost of money on this, but it doesn't mean that the company is necessarily making more money because they're socially responsible. They're just finding ways to do better, which just happens to be socially responsible.
Right.
The means of finding a method that's cheaper is not necessarily always the method that's socially responsible. It just happens to be the coincidence in this case. And they're not selling more iPhones because they're boasting about being socially responsible. Because when is the last time you saw an Apple advertisement that said they use recycled materials on their iPhone? Yeah, most people have no idea that they recycle most of their electronics to make the iPhones and computers and stuff.
Yeah.
But they do, but people buy it for completely unrelated reasons.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're rated so high on that list is... I wouldn't call it merely coincidence. It's literally just business practice. It makes more money because they found that recycling was cheaper than mining. So the materials are a little bit cheaper. So we're going to buy these materials instead. So we're going to offer programs to recycle your old iPhones, in which case they also run the used market of parts where they maintain how people fix and replace certain components. Because instead of fixing a broken iPhone, they'll just recycle it back to Apple and buy a new one, which was made from recycled materials. Yeah. And it's just a business model that's driving costs down for them, not so much for the consumer.
And I mean, this is the important thing to also consider as well. I almost lost my train of thought there. So Apple may have like a high environmental score. ESG, we're measuring social and governance as well. Do you remember when Apple was caught underpaying the Chinese employees and kind of mistreating them and housing them in really poor, the big Apple manufacturing campuses. Foxconn. Right. They did the whole coverage on it, and I mean, Apple got crushed. And that's the part that's kind of confusing me is ESG is not just environmental. We have to also look at the social and governance. So, Apple might have a high environmental standard, which is fantastic, but it's just one of those things where if it's in a vegan fund, and I'm assuming vegans care about humans just as much as they care about the animals, or at least one would hope so.
I would hope so.
Yeah,
I can't guarantee anything.
Right. We will say we'll safely assume they do. We'll pretend like everyone is like, if I care about animals, I'm going to care about the humans.
Sure.
At least equal level. If you're going to not kill animals, but regardless, if these guys are mistreating some of the Chinese citizens, I feel like there's that big conflict there. Moral hazard is introduced, the whole idea of ethics and how they're treating their employees. So I'm just kind of curious what their ESG total score would be with that. And then the second thing that I also wanted to introduce was, when we were looking at our portfolio last year, the dividend paying stocks were performing very well. I think we had like a 24% return, which was phenomenal. But the ESG portfolio was on the same linear path. They were 150 basis points lower than the dividend paying stock. So what that means is that they are growing, right? They're performing well, but they're not performing at the same level as dividend paying stocks, which kind of brings that idea of, to sin or not to sin type of mentality, where sinning is this idea of investing in a company that might have a high carbon footprint or, may have a history of mistreating workers and, that type of stuff. Because at the end of the day, we found that a lot of dividend paying stocks that aren't considered ESG perform very well. ExxonMobil, although they're petroleum and extraction, they invest a ton of money into clean energy resources.
So they cover both ends of the spectrum, in which case for them, it's more of like them leveraging against themselves in the case of a crash or a market change, in which case that has nothing to do with their ESG.
Right.
Future-proofing, essentially.
Yeah,
Right.
I think ESG, you're probably spot on, is sort of unrelated. It just comes after. It's just a rating that, like, after they've done their business, then there's this rating that comes second.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's our big worry is we don't want people investing just because one number's high.
Michael Burry was his name.
Michael Burry. Okay.
Yeah. He said that there is a bubble with passive investments. And ESGs might play a part in that.
It could.
People just would invest into companies just because they have high, good ESG ratings,
Right.
and that's their reasoning. So there could be a bubble there. That's something to look into.
It's possible.
That's an interesting kind of theory.
I'm gonna actually write that down because I guess that is kind of an interesting thing to consider. Is a bubble growing regarding ESG? So I mean, if there is a bubble with passive investing,
That's another thing to look into.
Yeah, that would be pretty bad. That'd be very bad. I guess at that point you would have to really measure, I guess, a correlation effect between passive investing and ESG models, passive investing models to ESGs. But no, I think that's a good question.
Yeah.
There could be a bubble there because I think that at the end of the day, that's what we really screw up in America is when it comes to education, we just don't teach people how to, manage their money. We don't teach them how to be smart investors or how to make money other than work. And we used to before the 21st century, we used to have classes that taught kids how to cook and taught kids how to invest and do their taxes and participate in the capitalist society. And now we just don't have classes that teach that anymore.
That's a huge portion of society is money management, time management as well. As a lot of people have very poor time management skills because no one has ever really taught how to properly do what it is that they need to do ahead of, things that people don't know how to prioritize. Right. And this is true for business and investors as well, is they'll dump money into places that might not necessarily matter in a lot of cases. Like, for instance, dumping money into an ESG rated
just
company.
Because of the number.
Yeah. So, right. Yeah, you're right. Money management, time management, priorities, all this stuff is lacking.
Yeah,
very lacking.
I mean that's why I really hope in the future our generation, once the older generation starts cycling out and our generation begins to take foot in the realms of politics and everything that we see today, I really hope many of us begin to push to teach our future generations how to participate efficiently in the society. Because as much as we may not like some of the things within our society, there are a lot of ways to cooperate and to participate in it very efficiently to grow wealth. The problem is we just don't know how to do it. That's the big thing. For example, my parents grew up incredibly poor. And I grew up pretty poor, and we had to build our way up. And now I'd say we're comfortably middle class. I don't think we're middle upper. I don't think we're middle lower, but I think we're just in the nice center. And it takes a lot of work to get there. But now the big worry is whether or not my parents have retirement, because they have not really paid a whole lot of attention to it. And I feel like a lot of other generations are going through the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And just tying that all together, it's that big spiral of, you were working really hard and living paycheck, and you had some in savings, but you weren't investing, you weren't using wealth management tools, and I think that's a problem. We should teach people how to use wealth management tools.
There's a very small portion of America that's actually prepared for retirement, which is also why you're seeing a lot of people. The retiring age is increasing significantly, and you're seeing a lot of people much older than they used to be still working, still making ends meet. You'll see people in their 70s and 80s still pulling, regular 9-to-5 jobs that aren't even paying significantly well or making good use of their knowledge or their old professions. They're just working some job.
Yeah, that's very true. My grandma, she's still a nurse. She does like hospice care work and stuff. Wow. And I think what's kind of unfortunate is, there's people who are her age who are in hospice care, and she is the same age as them taking care of them. and she still has to work.
My handyman used to be a civil engineer making reasonable money in Russia, moved here in the hopes that he could get better health care, actually. And he's settled down for handyman work as opposed to finding a civil engineering position. Wow. And he's a bit older. He's not that old, but he's around the age that most people would retire. He's in like mid 60s? To early 60s, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And he's doing handyman work with no plans of retirement, still trying to save up and kind of wait for some better health care. I mean, he has a few issues of his own he needs to take care of, but like he moved away from a reasonable paying position with a degree in civil engineering down to handiwork. And I mean, he says it's enough for him, but I think he just unable to do the work he used to be able to do or something. And the fact that like your age definitely affects you in more ways than one. Right. It's part of it. And the fact that he doesn't have any money saved up and his time management, I will say, is quite poor. It takes him a long time to do a job that any other company would do rather quickly.
Right.
And there's a lot that goes into that. There's a lot of skills that are lacking.
Right. I mean, it's right now we're seeing in America, big educational reform, a lot of push for college degrees. Skilled labor is becoming very valuable, right? But we're also seeing that a lot of, people who are older are not really being considered for positions as much as younger generation, only because a lot of people in the younger generation can do what some of the older generation can do plus more. And it's unfortunate because there are some people out there who are incredibly skilled. They just need the time to mature into a changing industry or a changing field. And I mean, your handyman, just going from engineering, coming to America, and then, I mean, I personally see that as a slight downgrade. I mean, if he's okay with it, then that's totally fine. But yeah, I understand the disappointment he may feel.
He knows it's a downgrade, but he's okay with it. But I'm not so sure about that statement about like hiring younger people over older people.
Yeah.
I once had a conversation with my dad, who was a senior mechanical engineer at a company that worked and made medical equipment. Mm-hmm. And he was there for a long time, and he was a well-respected member or employee there. A lot of people looked up to his information and guidance because he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
And oftentimes when they would hire, he would freak out on why they're hiring young people, and he had the opposite point of view. He said, you shouldn't hire young people because they don't know what they're doing yet. They're just getting in the industry, and they have absolutely no idea. And some of them are either stubborn or not willing to learn. And the people who have been around in the industry have experience, so they genuinely do know what they're doing because they know what to look for and they know what to do better than people who are just getting started off. Specifically, he was talking specifically about mechanical engineering because, say for instance, your company manufactures a part that requires a seal around some component that needs like an O-ring or something. And some kid might come in and think, yeah, I know exactly how to machine this, or I know exactly the tolerances we're looking for. Whereas he might not realize that the company bases all of their information off of a, basically you would call it a solutions manual. A giant manual where there's a guide that some company has put out that says, if you want this O-ring, you need this tolerance, and you're going to get it from this company, it's this part number. If you want this tolerance and this O-ring and this and that, and it gives you all this sort of great information on how something would be specifically done. And all the work is done for you, and whereas the young guy might not have the knowledge to look into the solutions manual and pull it off, he might already have an idea, well, this company's already done the work for us, or like, why do I need to engineer my own solution if someone else already has before? Your problem's already done for you.
Yeah.
It makes your life easier, it makes your work more efficient, and that's the whole point of engineering, is coming up with solutions that are more efficient, that make your life easier, or whatever it is for, they're problem solvers.
Right.
And young people don't have enough of the experience to have solved these problems in the past before. So he came up with the previous point of view, but then there's also the opposition, which is, well, we're young, we're ready to learn, and, I got my degree, I want to get into the industry somehow. How am I going to solve a problem if I never come across it?
Well, I mean, businesses also evaluate too. I mean, cost. If you're looking at cost benefit in the long run, hiring a younger person in the position, catering to them, and then having them grow a sense of like loyalty to build into the corporate culture or the company's culture, then they're more likely to stick around, learn, absorb. But again, it has to do with personality too. Like, are they really ready to take on the work, and they're ambitious and they're like, yes, I really want to do it, or are they just kind of like, look, I just want to make some money and that's it. I think that's where you have to kind of evaluate it, because some people might not really be in the right mindset to learn.
How effectively are you able to build a sense of loyalty and keep those retention rates pretty high?
Right.
Because if if you're not able to kind of effectively build an environment where your employees want to continue to work for you, they're just gonna take that knowledge and skills and jump to another ship.
Oh yeah.
So
it brings
how
that
well you can execute that is very important.
Absolutely. And I mean, it brings that statement of people don't quit jobs, they quit bosses. They quit leadership. They quit managers.
You're right. No, that's definitely true for my dad. I also wasn't really saying that one side is right over the other. You should hire old people. You should hire young people.
Yeah, a mix. Yeah.
Honestly, it ultimately comes down to what you need the person for. If you're hiring a senior or a lead mechanical engineer, you're obviously not going to hire someone with 1 or 2 years of experience.
Right.
Because that's a position that requires a good number of experience. But I mean, if you're looking for an intern, you're not going to hire a senior mechanical engineer.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So everything has its perspective, and that changes. But the industry is littered with like wrong choices, and my dad was freaking out mostly because they hired people with no experience for something that probably required 3 to 5 years of experience, and these people who made mistakes, and so he probably had a set point of view, and he was a little more stubborn about it, I think.
I mean, I feel like engineering is one of those things where you do have to have that sense of accuracy. I mean, look at Boeing.
Yeah.
People literally died because there was an error.
Yeah.
Be it engineering or computer, whatever, it could have been either or. I don't really know this. I heard it was something wrong with one of the gauges, and I guess it like chain reacted to cause another issue with something else, and as a result, I guess the plane was just not functioning correctly and then crashed.
Yeah.
So people literally died. So, I mean, in that case, yeah, if you need someone who needs that experience, I would get someone with that experience. Yeah, like I get that. It makes sense.
So this is actually somewhat similar to one of the topics I wanted to cover, because this is something I covered in one of my classes recently, which was the topic was about nuclear engineering. And this covers basically power and cost to electricity and the future, because this industry is huge. The big question that we've had over the last 10, 15 years is how we're going to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels, and how we're going to move on to renewable energies, and what's renewable, what's green, what can save the planet, and there's a million of these questions. I'm sure everyone's been bombarded by this more than enough.
Oh, of course. Now, in the 21st century, we're always talking about climate change.
Now,
it's everywhere.
Deaths and, the issues with, like, poor engineering and causing serious issues. History is littered with bad work. Engineering is littered with bad engineers. A lot of people are scared when they hear the word nuclear. I think the Cold War really brought a poor mindset of nuclear energy into the world, because everything was related. When you hear nuclear, you thought nuclear bombs and you thought Russia and the U.S. are going to kill each other, and it's going to be a nightmare.
Well, the first real introduction to nuclear was the bombs.
World War II. So. And you have stuff
which is
like,
pretty scary. We see the aftermath. It's not pretty.
Listen, it is scary. You're right. There's the aftermath of Chernobyl. A small handful of people died during the accident, and then an immeasurable number of people died after due to cancer caused by radiation sickness and disease spread from the radiation that came from Chernobyl. We ourselves live about a 10-minute drive from the Santa Susana Field Laboratory, which experienced the United States' worst nuclear catastrophe in U.S. history.
Right.
And you might not realize that it was the worst nuclear catastrophe in U.S. history because there were almost no gases that went into the air that contaminated the air that we breathe. Everything went into the ground. It was relatively controlled. It was only a partial meltdown experienced by one of the reactors, which was ultimately shut down quickly. And the lab, I think in 2004, was fully deactivated. It was run by Rocketdyne, who actually had a history of poor not business practices, poor safekeeping practices on like storage of nuclear waste. And so that facility has been shut down, but that's a really rare occurrence. Ultimately,
people still get sick up there.
No.
Yeah. No, people do. I was last year I was reading an article that was coming out that was it wasn't celebrating, but it was marking the anniversary of the incident. I guess it was like the 20th or something. I don't know.
No, this happened in I want to say 58 or 59. So a while ago.
There was an incident in Porter Ranch.
The gas leak?
No, that's the gas leak.
Oh, maybe I'm getting him. You know what? You're probably right. Actually, I'm sorry. I'm probably getting him mixed up with the gas leak. People were getting sick from that.
Oh, yeah, the methane leak definitely caused a couple of issues.
Okay, you're right. Yeah, I'm mixing it up. My bad. Yeah, this is completely irrelevant.
So there hasn't been very much negative environmental and human impact from the incident, and ultimately, nuclear energy is incredibly green, incredibly sustainable, relatively cheap, and still competitive. And I just saw a recent article saying that the 3 Mile Island was closing down. Mm-hmm. The 3 Mile Island, if I remember correctly, was the first commercial nuclear reactor to produce more energy than it spent that began to sell electricity at a relatively low cost. But it's deemed that they're no longer profitable because of a competitive energy market, and they're shutting down a nuclear reactor. And I think that's a huge mistake.
There's also a meltdown on 3 Mile Island in the past before.
I mean, that was a contained meltdown. Like, the word meltdown sounds really, really horrendous and horrifying, but ultimately some core component melted, so they shut it down, and there was no release of any sort of gas or anything into the air. It was a contained meltdown. So, like, it just means that they had a failed component. Something broke, something didn't go right, and they shut down that reactor. And then they fixed it after. But the thing is, the word meltdown is a really, really scary word.
Right.
But there's companies that have failures where machinery and things break all the time. It's common.
Right.
Name a company that hasn't had at least one accident or breaking of machinery or something, It's the greenest form of energy because ultimately everything comes from nuclear fusion, which is the sun. The sun fuels everything on our Earth, from the wind, which is, solar power, to hydroelectric dams because of the energy moving, the flow of water and stuff. Everything comes from nuclear fusion. There are a few companies actually striving to achieve nuclear fusion here right now, and you're going to see nuclear energy become a lot more prevalent in the next 10 years. Nuclear fusion is the opposite of fission. In fission, where you have atoms splitting to create more atoms, splitting to create more atoms in a controlled environment, fusion is the opposite. You're combining atoms to make new elements. And the release of energy is so massive from the combination of these elements that you end up with so much more power than you actually consume that it's almost perpetual energy, and it's very cheap to do so, as long as you can maintain your facilities. That is the concept. That's what we're striving to achieve. In 2017, there's a nuclear fusion reactor, which was the first privately funded reactor, achieved a record of 15 million degrees, which is hotter than the surface of the sun. Damn. That's incredible. Yeah.
Fusion requires a giant amount of heat.
Yeah.
To actually make it happen, which is where the problem comes in currently, which they're trying to overcome, which is it costs more energy to have fusion occur than fusion outputs.
Yeah, so we're not there yet.
Yeah.
15 million degrees.
That's a challenge.
Yeah, so 15 million degrees is not enough to do fusion. So ultimately, they're just spending energy at the moment. It's said that within the next 5 to 10 years, they'll have achieved fusion, and the goal is 100 million degrees. Wow. It seems like a huge number, but scientists say it's definitely achievable, and it's just a matter of gathering and combining and building the resources to do so. So it's literally just a matter of not figuring out the science, because apparently it seems to already be figured out, It's just a matter of construction and time and
implementing
funding.
it.
Yeah, and implementing.
I mean, and see, this is the interesting part: is we know that this is a renewable source of energy, and the thing is I think it has a bad rep, personally, because it does hold a lot of dangers, and I think the most notable danger was, in Japan when the whole tsunami hit and the Fukushima reactors got destroyed. Well, yeah, it was the earthquake and then the tsunami. It was just a chain reaction of horrible events, and you had nuclear leakage because the tsunami came. All the tanks that were storing water that was exposed to the nuclear rods were pretty much bursted open and then leaked into the ocean. But from stage one, that was kind of poor placement. I think a lot of people have kind of already understood that, maybe putting it on the ocean and all that, probably wasn't a good idea. But yeah, if we put more research, if we put more money into really funding it, cost benefit wise, nuclear energy is very good because solar requires land. And you're going to build all these panels that takes up land, and that's detrimental to the environment. We've already come to the point that solar is detrimental to the environment.
Solar panels, I have a pretty strong opinion on solar panels because solar panels at the end of the day is an old technology that is almost not improved at all, and it's a detrimental technology. And by that I mean, approximately the average calculated is that every year a solar panel, a voltaic cell, will lose about 6% of its efficiency. And there's companies who lease out these panels for 20 to 30 years, but in reality, in 15 years, your panel has lost 90% of its efficiency, and it's not really doing what it once was when you first installed it. So at first, it might save you a little bit of money, but later on down the line, you're losing money. You're paying more because you'll have to pay for electricity and for the solar panel. And you're right. You didn't know that because most of America doesn't. They don't tell you this because this is a business at the end of the day. They're selling you something. They don't want to tell you the negative side effects. Tesla's not going to tell you that their car is electric powered and there's no way to gas power it, so when you run out of electricity, you're fucked.
Oh, there was an incident where a police car that was, I think it wasn't Tesla. I'm not sure if it was Tesla, but it was a full electric police car. It was being used in a pursuit. So, they were on patrol.
Out of power in the middle of pursuit.
It ran out of power in the middle of the pursuit.
I read that. It was a Tesla.
Oh, it was?
It was a Tesla.
And that was the big thing was there was that's it. So if he was the only cop chasing after this dude, the dude just got away because the cop's car died.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then it comes to the point of he should have charged his car.
Well, he was on patrol.
Well, at that point, if you're at any point where you see the freaking empty gas tank sign come up or low gas tank, you gotta go recharge.
Well, it was a long pursuit though. So some pursuits.
How long? Because it can go. A fully charged Tesla can go for how many? 200?
Depends on the battery range, but I think it's between 250 350 miles, depending on which battery you have.
So I'll be honest. I don't know specifics on how long the pursuit went on for, but
same thing would have happened with a low gas tank at some point. So it doesn't really matter.
That's true, but realistically speaking, I'm pretty sure that the police force have a contingency. If your vehicle's X amount of gas or battery leveled, you should bring it in. I'm pretty sure that cop wasn't boy, I only got 20 miles left, but I'm gonna just stay out. I'm pretty sure that dude had enough energy in there, and then when this pursuit started, I'm pretty sure he engaged, and the pursuit went on for a long period of time.
That's assumptions. We would have to ask and look into it.
We would, but I'm saying reasonable though. Would it be unreasonable to say that you wouldn't have a contingency?
Well, then it would come to why wouldn't there be a contingency for an electric car? Then that's just poor planning on the police.
No, I said there is a contingency for the electric car. I'm saying for gas and electric, if it hits a certain meter or a point, then you recall the vehicle to the station, charge it, and swap the vehicle. So I'm saying maybe that guy was within the realm of not using the contingency, meaning maybe he had 100 miles left, and I don't know.
I digress. So,
but yeah.
So either way, at the end of the day, I do think nuclear energy is definitely the future. Well, okay, so you mentioned that they had issues in Japan where the the reactor was damaged, and there's nuclear waste
after
and so
the
on to deal with.
earthquake and then the tsunami.
The thing about nuclear fusion is that you're not necessarily using uranium, because uranium is, the whole point is to split the atoms of the uranium because of the specific isotope. It allows for such a thing to occur. But here you're combining hydrogen atoms. You don't have nearly as much radioactive waste. It's a totally different story. You're superheating an element to combine it to get the next element up. And so it ends up being, it's a completely different method. It's a lot, assuming that you're not touching 100 million degrees with your hands, everything is contained, your waste is a lot more confined, sorry, not combined. Yeah, so it's possibly the absolute greenest form of energy, because at the end of the day, all of our energy comes from nuclear fusion, from the sun. We're just replicating the same thing. And I don't actually know what the cost to energy ratio will be, how competitive it will be in the market. I get the idea that it'll probably swarm the market so well that everyone will try to copy it, because it'll consume, again, at the end of the day, the whole goal is to produce significantly more energy than it consumes. So they'll literally have, a perpetual supply of energy to continue to do the same thing over and over again, where almost no resources are required other than maintenance. You'll see a huge shift in the energy market. Companies like Solar City will fail. These solar panel companies, voltaic cell companies and manufacturers, all the companies, leasing companies that sell you someone else's panels, you're going to see a huge shift in the energy industry.
So there's two kind of points that I want to ask you, or just kind of bring up. One is I do agree that nuclear should be in the discussion of getting away from fossil fuels. How we kind of get off of freaking coal and natural gas and gasoline. Right. Especially because currently a lot of the renewable sources like wind, solar, hydroelectric, they don't produce enough energy, even if we increase their scales and those facilities. They don't produce enough energy to meet our energy needs. The amount of energy we consume, I don't think, can be matched by...
Globally, no, but regionally, yes. And it depends on the regions. There's a lot of regions that run off of entirely based on hydroelectric dams.
Well,
produce so much energy.
Yeah.
Let's use Los Angeles as the reference. We're not talking about Bumpkin County where they can have a freaking one.
If you go to Iceland,
Los Angeles is one of the biggest cities in the world.
Geothermal energy that powers everything. Was it Iceland or Greenland?
Yeah.
That's great there, but I'm talking about generally across the entire country and the globe. You're not going to be able to fuel it all with that.
There are a lot of places where you can do these sort of things, like building more hydroelectric dams, and often you'll find that when they're in power excess, they'll sell off the excess power to neighboring states, countries, whatever. For a long period of time, the UK was actually producing more power than it consumed. So it sold power to France, if I recall correctly.
Well, but see, here's the thing to consider. So I agree with Sarkis only because there's an opportunity cost, and the opportunity cost is land. So I agree with both of you, actually. So you're right. We probably could scale it, because we would just get all these wind turbines and be boom, build a giant freaking farm within. We can scale it. But we've already done ecological surveys of what happens when we build these giant wind farms and giant solar panel cities. It damages the environment, and it damages the biome that these species are living in. So we've seen, adverse effects with turtles.
Yeah.
We've seen adverse effects with, birds, so vultures that are scavengers.
Birds, particularly with wind farms.
Yeah, with wind farms.
That, my friend, is where nuclear energy comes in.
Right, exactly. And I don't know if that's what you were kind of segueing into.
What's the question?
The question, hold on, kind of got lost in the sauce.
I know, there's a lot of sauce here.
There's a lot of sauce. There's soy sauce right here. Let's see. What was going to be my question? It was.
While you think of that, I did want to say, so basically, if you're planning on investing in like solar panel companies and things that are based off of like wind farms and so on,
I
would honestly recommend against it for the long term because you're going to see a shift in.
What is the likelihood of a new solar panel technology emerging that is more efficient and doesn't lose its efficiency every year or so? Like the ones we currently have.
Highly unlikely.
That's a good question. Why?
Yeah.
So it's an innate nature of the technology itself because it hasn't changed very much over a very long period of time. So basically, you have to understand what a solar panel is, and the fact that the technology hasn't changed in a very long time. You might be able to get small percentages of efficiency here and there, but ultimately you're not going to achieve the same level of scale that nuclear fusion will achieve indefinitely. Once it happens, it'll blow it out of the water. Basically, your solar panel is like a sandwich of 3 different materials. In order to get electricity, you have to have a loop, a circuit. There's a positive and a negative, and it's connected. So think of like a circle, right?
Yeah.
Now, you have polar ends, positive and negative, one on each side. So usually some form of material just to create a magnetic field. And then in the middle is silicon, which is a semiconductor. And you just sandwich it together, and for the most part, that's your simplest version of a photovoltaic cell. You have something that absorbs some form of radiation or energy and converts it into power through this loop. And then you connect that through some form of a transformer, which then turns AC into DC. And then you have, the other way around, DC into AC. You have direct current coming from the sun that your cells capture, turning into alternating current that your home and everything can use. You have a loss of efficiency in your panel. You have a loss of efficiency in the lines running to your transformer. You have a loss of efficiency in the transformer itself because if you know how a transformer works, it's not directly touching, it's just converting a circuit. So anytime you involve a transformer, you're already losing some form of power. And by converting it from AC to DC or the other way around, whatever, you're losing some amount of electricity as well. And it's just the inherent nature of the technology that can only be improved so much. You will never have 100% efficiency. So as much space as it takes up, it still loses some form of power due to heat or capacity or the transformer or something, or where you store your power, like a battery. Your battery as well. Once you store something in a battery, it starts losing power the moment it's there.
One kind of, I know this is maybe out there, one of the kind of questions I have is, how are plants able to have such great energy efficiency and absorb so much energy from the sun?
What kind of plants? What do you mean?
Like just general, like
photosynthesis is what you're talking about?
Plants.
Not like manufacturing.
Oh no. I'm not a biologist.
And could that be replicated?
Actually, it's funny you mentioned that. I read an article where they're trying to figure that out for space travel. So efficiencies using plant matter for energy, and they're using it for carbon scrubbers with algae. They're trying to use algae as a way to produce energy and at the same time cycle out carbon. So I honestly, and I agree, I'm not a biologist. I have no fucking clue how the hell they can do this. But I have read that they are comparing, plant efficiency and photosynthesis. How can we replicate that?
The biological efficiency of some living things. How can we replicate that? Yeah,
that's interesting. I don't know.
Yeah. I would say
cool idea.
I would say this, if you want to replicate that type of efficiency, I feel like you would have to use something from that realm of efficiency and extrapolate from it. Plant matter, take some plant matter, and
I'm not sure you'll be able to pull energy from that, but I think you might be able to accomplish some task, like you said, like pulling out carbon or something like that.
Well, Elon Musk wants to put a patch on our head that makes electricity from our stress. So
listen, at the end of the day, plants absorb energy, and we eat the plants for our own energy, so we're already using it to some extent,
Yeah.
But I don't actually know. I don't see. I'm not sure that there is a way to convert that into usable energy for your home to power your lights.
That's a good question, though.
I don't know. There is like the lemon
question,
batteries, like the acidity, but like how that directly correspond. I don't know. That's a tough one.
I mean, can you imagine a day where like I can walk around my charger, walk up to a tree, and just like pop it into the bark? Like, all right, gotta charge my phone.
Plug
like,
in my iPhone charger into that oak tree over there.
Yeah.
That's a cool concept. I have no idea. That's an interesting idea, but I've never given that thought before.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a lot of video games out there that have like, the nature's living, and we live with the nature, and I mean, we always joke about these things, and I mean, I'm joking now, but all these fantasy shit we create, like. Who knows,
it's
man?
It's a funny concept.
Yeah, it's a funny concept. But
dude, if I could plug my Tesla into my tree,
your Tesla's out of battery. Don't worry, plug it into the grass. You're set, man.
In 6 years, I'll have a full battery again. Hell yeah!
All these lights are all run by my roses.
That'd be cool, though. I mean, I gotta say, because at least in current real estate style right now with like hospitality and multifamily. I was telling you guys, actually, I don't know if I told you guys, but, garden style is very popular right now, which is, big open spaces, a lot of lighting, and a lot of green. People really like that stuff. And I mean, when I was in Hawaii, it was super green, and I loved it. It was a good design. No one wants to live in tenement buildings.
See, one of the things that, like, in terms of, like, replicating things we find in nature, there's a lot of, in terms of medicine, there's a lot of really interesting observations you could find in sea life. And like the regenerative abilities of jellyfish and starfish, how they can like regrow limbs. Like I feel like there's a lot of, in terms of technology and like medical technology, there's a lot where you can observe certain processes in nature and then try and see if it's possible to maybe try and replicate or learn from those processes.
Yeah. So, I mean, it wasn't that kind of their intent with stem cells, the whole idea that you can grow.
In fact, they do a lot of that. I mean, they've
right.
grown back, I believe, noses already.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they've grown back noses with stem cells. And I believe, I forgot which organ it was that they grew back with some stem cells or repaired with stem cells.
Aren't they trying to 3D print hearts with the use of stem cells?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, that's another
thing. And I think they had like a prototype or something, and they tested it, and it worked.
And it works.
Yeah. So instead of needing a donor or someone needs to die, you could just grow your own heart, and it could be from your own stem cells. So there's almost no chance of it being rejected.
Yeah.
Which is huge.
It's honestly...
It's pretty crazy.
When I think of stem cells, the thing that cracks me up is I think of the Family Guy episode when, Peter has a stroke and
he just walks in and walks out.
Why aren't we funding this? Like, that's what I'm thinking right here. STEM research is so incredible. I mean, who would have thought it is? I mean, the fact that I can be like, damn, I drank my liver out. I'm going to need that replacement. All right, let's go ahead and just pull up a petri dish
I think the initial scare was the way that you would acquire stem cells. It was something to do with like pulling eggs out of a uterus or something, and that it was damage to the female body. But now that most stem cells are grown in a lab and not pulled from people, that's not an issue anymore.
And I heard they can take it from like your spine.
So there's a couple different ways.
I heard that too.
Yeah.
The thing that they were concerned about, and this is kind of a silly fear in my opinion, is that a lot of stem cells you can get from the umbilical cord. So one of the concerns is where people were thinking, people just have get pregnant and have abortions just for the stem cells. Like that was
Don't we already throw away the umbilical cord? So I mean,
I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Because that's a stem cell rich, and it's placenta as well. It's a stem cell rich.
Well, some people eat that, but
crazy people.
I'm pretty sure I'm wrong about where stem cells come from, but yeah, the concept is there.
Yeah, it's there, but also now I believe they've have abilities of pulling some stem cells out of your fat, so lipids.
That's good news.
And then also from your spine and from your marrow. They're also able to get that.
Well,
so
that's just freaking fascinating.
Yeah, it's pretty really interesting.
I'd say the same thing that Family Guy reference about nuclear engineering. Why aren't we
funding this? No, I agree. Yeah. And you know what? I think a lot of it does have ties with, if you look back at the original way we would need stem cells. Yeah, maybe it was an unsavory thing, and maybe people who are more conservative or traditionalist may have seen that as like
a
not
potentially bad thing, but
in a religious
realistically,
society.
Right,
it was blown out of proportion.
Yeah, I mean, religious societies too. And I think that's kind of a big. It's always complicated because you want to let people have their liberty and freedom to express religion, but at what point does one's ideology impose a slowdown or a disability?
At the end of the day, you have to remember that America is still a hugely Christian nation, and God is literally on our money.
Right. Oh yeah, that's true.
But
God watches over all of us when we're buying unsavory things with that dollar.
When we're putting dollar bills
at the club, God's literally watching.
honestly, one of the biggest questions I still have to this day is, from our history, we formed a country out of religious freedom and a lot of other reasons, but religious freedom was definitely one of them. The concept of separation of church and state. They made that hugely obvious in all of elementary school, middle school, and high school growing up.
Yeah.
And they literally write God on our money.
That was actually a product of the Cold War.
Yeah.
Because communists were, on principle, atheists and weren't religious. To kind of counteract that,
No.
Wait, that's why in God we...
Wait.
What? Really?
Yeah.
No, Russia's hugely Catholic and Orthodox.
It was, but the USSR, on principle, on paper, was not.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Well, that
and
makes
there was
sense,
religious oppression in Russia.
So just because the people are mostly Catholic or Orthodox, it's not necessarily the morals of the government.
Yeah, exactly. It was more against the government than the people, really.
Right.
So
well, because
our government went more into Christianity and embraced that.
Wait a minute, no, I'm not sure that's totally accurate, because I've seen instances of older bills that also have like God written on money even prior to the Cold War. From like the 30s, 40s, and 50s, you see like dollar bills and 20s and stuff that are like really old that still says that at the bottom.
I mean, I mean, let's see. I mean, the people who came over to the United States in the original colonies. I mean, we had Mormons, Quakers, some Catholics, Protestants.
56
is when they started writing "In God We Trust."
Appeared on the 2-cent piece in 1864 and has appeared on paper currency since 1957.
So once we went to fiat.
Okay.
Wow. So I mean, that's interesting, and you know what I think is really unique about that? It just shows how culture affects basic business practices. I mean, going all the way to the most minute thing, which is just the form of transaction, and its impact to just the design of that. That's pretty damn fascinating.
Yeah. America's still predominantly Christian, but like, there's a lot of people that live here that aren't as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, the most amazing thing about America is we have pretty much one of everything in this
diversity.
nation. Yeah, 100% diversity.
So what? I don't want to upset anybody, but why is that written on our money then? If it was literally just to upset the Soviet Union, like, it's just money. Like,
it's one of those things where I think it's minute and a lot of people don't. Well, it could be that, but I mean, at the same time, like for me personally, when I use my $1 bill, I honestly don't give a fuck like what's on it. I'm just like, what's on it. Yeah, I'm like, it's $1. At the end of the day, I'm pissed that I'm even using this $1, but you know what? I'm using it. But I think in that scenario, a lot of people just don't really think about it. Maybe they're just kind of like, it might say it, but I don't give a fuck.
Here we go. During the Cold War, the government of the United States sought to distinguish itself from the Soviet Union, which promoted state atheism and thus implemented anti-religious legislation. The 84th Congress passed a joint resolution declaring "In God We Trust" the national motto of the United States. The resolution passed both the House and the state without debate. And it was signed by Eisenhower in 1956, which had made it so that "In God We Trust" appeared on all paper and coin currency, and made it the national motto of the United States of America.
So Eisenhower passed that.
Yep. Well, I mean, it makes sense that an authoritarian or totalitarian government wouldn't want religious freedom. I mean,
oh yeah,
when you have religious population, it creates a sense of it creates a sense of difference, which is bad.
Well, it's also power.
It's power.
Religious leaders have power. They don't want that.
Right.
They don't need competitors.
There's a lot of history of religion combining with government to maintain that role of power.
Yeah, but those have never ended. I mean, dude, we can go down that history track and find out every single one was corrupted in one sense or another.
I'm not saying it's right
bad.
or wrong, but like that's a majority of history.
Yeah.
It's true. Yeah, I mean, religion has played an outstanding role. And I mean, I was talking to Sarkis about this. You know, the reason why mankind... All right, actually, I feel like I may have mentioned it before, but I mean, the reason why mankind is able to live in communities and cooperate with one another is because we've created a sense of community by creating these things that make us feel like we're together.
Part of something.
Yeah, so like, you know, religion comes about and we're like, yeah, I believe in the trees being alive. You believe in the trees being... Dude, that's awesome. Like, we got to make sure the trees are still alive. Like, you know, down to the most basic and ancient form of religion, which is, you know, trying to create these gods that help explain the things around us. You know, when you created a commonplace environment and people were like, yeah, you know, we're kind of in this together. You know, the Roman Empire, Greek Empire, many Asian empires that have rose to power had many gods. I mean, it made sense. People unified under it because they either feared God, revered God, one way or another. You know.
Last thing that I kind of want to touch on is just a short update of like Bitcoin and the kind of roller coaster that's happened in the last week or so.
That's good.
An interesting ride.
It was tracking at around 10K or so.
It peaked over 12.
Yeah, peaked over 12. Went down to around 10K and then dipped. Went down to about 8K. For a short time, went under 8K. What was it, like 7,900?
I thought I saw it hit 76.
Oh, 7.6.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, it's down there.
Now it's back up to 8,200. There's no real, from what I see, there's no real explanations yet, though I have seen some speculations. One of the things is apparently it might be tied to manipulation of Tether. Yeah,
really?
the stable coin.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Wait, no, it dipped to 79, 78. Yeah, sorry.
That's all good.
Wow.
Yeah, so Tether, which apparently it's the largest and most popular stable coin in the cryptocurrency space.
Right.
It is a form of liquidation for a lot of investors in the crypto space. And apparently about 80% of all of the Tether in circulation is controlled by only about 300 addresses.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's surprisingly little.
Yeah. So there's some speculation that there might have been some market manipulation there. Perhaps I believe there's an increase in the amount or circulation of Tether that might have kind of
so when
screwed
you're
with the prices of Bitcoin.
So that means as Tether quantity increases, we're seeing general decreases for all other currencies because it's a form of I guess convergence.
There's been some kind of, from what I see, warning signs of Tether being something you should probably avoid or a risk factor in the crypto space.
Interesting.
It was apparently supposed to be for every Tether, it's supposed to be backed by $1. Although there was a lot of questioning of if that was actually true. And eventually the people behind Tether apparently coughed up to that's not how it works. Apparently there's not a single US dollar for every Tether that is in circulation. So that's risky, but apparently they have other other currencies or other
So is there anything that actually does back it, or is it just kind of like free floating?
It's from
like free floating, like random value almost. Well, why is it worth what it's worth? Is what I want to know.
That's what I'm trying to understand, and that's why
that's the general concern for all cryptocurrencies is backing.
Yeah,
that's a huge concern.
But with stable coins, especially something like Tether, which purports to actually be backed by US dollars, to actually have a US dollar backing per coin. So one Tether is $1 US.
Yeah. I mean,
for them to then say, "Oh, that's not how that works anymore," or "That's not how that works."
Yeah,
that's concerning.
So a large part of crypto and its value is the network that runs it, or the network that's behind it, the series of nodes, how it's run, its policies, its technologies, so on. There's a lot that goes into like making a transaction happen and the value behind each transaction and the fees and so on. But now that it's so commonly widespread that you saw a ton of coins pop up and then a ton of coins crash and a lot of things losing value, those unique things that was shared among all cryptos is no longer that unique anymore and has lost most of its value. So Tether just being another crypto isn't worth anything. So yeah, what is it? What makes it worth anything?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out, because this is the article I was reading.
This honestly sounds like when we were trying
to
get
this
off
claim
the
was
standard with
so apparently Tether themselves admitted that their tokens are not 100% backed by actual dollars, but by cash equivalents.
That makes no sense.
Yeah, I'm doing that.
Yeah. It's not backed by this, but it's also not backed by this. I'm like, oh, okay. That makes sense.
So our dollar is worth $1 because everyone says it's worth $1 and everyone's willing to accept it globally as a currency. Yeah, that's $1. I'll sell this for $1. Give me your $1 and I'll spend it on something else.
See, that's why I'm a little concerned. I mean, that's one concern I've always had about cryptocurrency is when we were going off gold standard and going to fiat, right? Our backings was gold. Our backings was actual, rare earth materials, even though gold is kind of a weird material that we base it off of because there's more other valuable materials or other whatever. Anyways, when we moved over to fiat and we had a bunch of paper money, we created a back system. We're like, all right, $1, $20, $20, whatever. Cryptocurrency is interesting because the backings is questionable, and then when we try to create backings for one, you have a scenario like this, then it brings to question, so what about the other ones that have no backings? What are we doing about those?
Yeah, so
that's a concern.
How many other cryptos out there are just as corrupt? Like, a lot of them. The thing is, we want to adopt this technology, but this technology is making it really hard for us to do so because of the few whales here and there that are running the game from behind the curtains, kind of manipulating it to make their few bucks and get out of there.
Yep.
That's the biggest problem, is they could be part of a much bigger global scale that, like, this could be a widely adopted... It could be the future of money for all we know, but like it's undergone a very hard acceptance.
Oh, 100%.
Or not acceptance, a very hard scrutiny and process upon its like entrance into the world. These last 8 years since, what was it, 2011 when it became a thing, or 2008 when it became a thing?
2008,
somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Ever since it became popular a couple years ago, it's gotten a lot of backtalk. It's
yeah. So I think that's we're gonna wrap up the episode for this week. Please, again, if you have any questions, email us. Hit up the subreddit at Financial Decapitation. And yeah, I guess that'll be it for this week. Good night.
Take care. Good night.
Is it this one?
Right? Yeah. The red button.
Mike's got a piss.
Oh, you didn't even turn it off yet. It's not ending.